Welcome to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we're going to get some insight into soccer, women's soccer at the college level. My guest today is Sean Driscoll, and he's the head women's soccer coach at Princeton University. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so usually I start my guests where they went to college. So where'd you go to school?
Went to Denison University in Granville, Ohio, which is a little bit odd because I was a Northeast kid. I went to private school in Connecticut, and then wound up taking the tour of schools I couldn't get into with my father, which ranged from Duke to North Carolina to UVA and Wake Forest and Notre Dame, and then realized I went to a very small private school with a graduating class of a whopping 50.
Wow.
And then decided that my guidance counselor said, listen, you need to look at smaller liberal arts schools, especially if you want to play sports. I was not the best athlete. I was a solid athlete. And so we looked at a variety of schools in the Midwest, and for whatever reason, I went to one school the day prior. It was rainy, miserable, horrible, 30 degrees. And the next day I went to Denison, and it was 65 and sunny, perfect weather, and it was just meant to be.
Great. So was that the only school that you looked at, or how many schools were you looking at?
I mean, we had another luxury of what we have these days, which is, a ton of club coaches and other coaches helping you find a place to go. A guidance counselor was very good at the time, but I didn't have that same luxury. So I did look at a number of schools. Oddly enough, in Ohio, it became a stronghold for liberal arts schools. So I looked at Wittenberg and Ohio Wesleyan and College of Worcester. I looked down in Virginia at Lynchburg and Roanoke. I mean, I was a solid student. I wasn't a tremendous student. So, I get a bit of an overachiever now.
Yeah. So now in high school, did you start thinking about college freshman year, senior year? When did it all begin for you?
It really wasn't until senior year. It was so different at that time. I mean, perhaps if I was a better athlete, it would have been different. But I think I just remember going through the process a lot in my senior first semester, my senior year, maybe the end of my junior year, but more specifically in the first semester of my senior year.
Wow. So now you're at Denison. What's the school like? How's it all about?
It's a beautiful place. I mean, it's very picturesque, all brick buildings. It looks a lot like Virginia in a lot of ways, surprisingly. You're looking you're in the Midwest, but red brick driven. Just a really gorgeous campus, really small New England town, which is probably what really drew me to it. A lot like the hometown I live in now in Pennington, just a very nice, quiet, charming town. And so I think there was some sort of familiarity with it, which is actually what attracted me to it. The facilities were great, the people were great, the coaches I liked a lot. Everyone I met along the way was someone I thought I could see myself being around, whether it was students on campus or faculty members or coaches.
Great. Now, so you played soccer there?
Oddly enough, this is a story that not many people know. I actually quit soccer in my freshman year and wound up playing tennis. And it's a small story that, not many people ask. They just assume because you coach soccer that you played soccer. And so I think soccer was my passion. There is no question. I was extremely immature when I went to college, extremely. I think I was probably a year early. And I wasn't ready, to be quite honest. I went out there and was overwhelmed by being away from home. These are the things you didn't think about when I was in college. As a Connecticut kid, I was very close to my family. I spent every Friday night at home all the time. We would watch a movie. My mother, my father, my sister, and I were thick as thieves. And then, when I went off to college, that was a big move for me to go out to Ohio, and I just was not prepared. And so I think being as immature as I was, looking back on it, that's really what affected my decision to play soccer. And I got out there, and I didn't do my research. It was a very Greek-oriented society there. They had a lot of fraternities and sororities. It was about 75%. It was one area that I missed. And I was not ready for that. And so the team was really predicated about a lot of certain fraternities and things like that, and I was not ready, and I wound up talking to the coach, just saying, listen, I'm not there yet, and I took some time. I literally took about a half a year and thought about actually transferring at that time to go play somewhere else, and ultimately I found a really good group of friends. I realized that I played tennis, basketball, and soccer in high school fairly well, and so I decided to pick up tennis and see what would happen with it. Of the three sports, that was my worst, but I really enjoyed the guys in the team. They were from all over the campus. There was no one fraternity in particular. It was a bunch of different guys. Some were independent, some were not. I found that really a relief, and so I wound up sticking with tennis and loving it, having a great experience, and enjoying my coach. Great guy. Still actually spoke to him a week ago. Just a fantastic human being, and one of the reasons I started coaching. So, if I look back on it, one of my very few regrets in life is that I was not a bigger person at the time. I wasn't ready for that, and I didn't go back to it because soccer is my passion. But I think for many reasons, the opportunity to play another sport was great, and it actually made me that much more excited about going back into it and becoming a coach.
So now you graduate Denison. How does one go from that to becoming the head soccer coach at Princeton University?
I really still don't know how that happened, to be honest. I went back to high school. My high school coach asked me if I would come back and work with the varsity boys team. And originally I said, absolutely not. I actually went back out to coach my tennis team. I went back out to Denison, coached a year there, and then came back to Connecticut. And the coach asked me again. He said, "Would you be willing to come back? The school would love to have you here. We value you here." It was such a small community. That meant a lot because I had no idea what I was going to do. And so I went and coached varsity. I was assistant coach of the varsity team, and there was a coach there. The head coach was actually one of the first people drafted into the MLS at the time, the Metro Stars. And I just found him fascinating. I thought he was a tremendous coach, tremendous player. He was a very good friend. We had a really good friendship for quite a while, and I just liked the way he coached. I liked the way he was meticulous and organized, and the passion he brought to it, and that got me excited. I had no idea that was going to happen, but being around him really got me excited about the idea of coaching. And so then I went from coaching Greens. The following year, the same AD came up to me and said, "Listen, would you like to coach the girls team?" And I didn't really think that was going to happen, but I decided to jump on that, and excuse me. And who knew? I mean, who knew at that time? I had enjoyed coaching the boys, but the girls I was not so sure about, and loved it. Had a great experience. We wound up winning my first year there. We won the championship, the league championship. I thought it was really easy. Didn't really know that much, but ultimately went really well, and the kids were great and enthusiastic. And I stayed there a couple of years, and then next thing you know, I started a premier club with some friends, and that skyrocketed. And then I wound up going up the ladder into different high schools. Coached one high school for 5 years, 4 years, another high school for a few years. Had a 10-year high school career overall. Won a couple state championships. Went undefeated one point. So I really had a very good experience with that. And at the same time, I was developing kids in my club and sending them off to college. So we were sending out a bunch of kids to college every year. And I was like, you know what? I like high school a lot. I like the premier stuff a lot. So the high school part was you saw them every day. The premier stuff was you got to select them. So the way to get both of those together, select them and work with them on a daily basis, was to go to college. And so a good friend of mine gave me a chance at Western Connecticut. Western Connecticut State University, had a great experience there. Manhattan College came open. I threw caution in the wind. I applied for a lot of jobs. That one selected me. That was a game changer for me. That changed everything because I went into a Division I program at the time that was ranked 296 out of 302 teams.
Wow. So
not very good at the time. And really took great effort and time and finding myself and who I wanted to be in terms of a coach to get these kids on the same page, and ultimately had an unbelievable experience there and didn't want to leave, to be honest, but I wasn't getting paid a ton at the time. And I got another offer to go back to my parents' alma mater at Fairfield University as an associate head coach. And even though the money was substantially more, I still balked at the idea of leaving a place that I had spent 5 years. And but basically AD said to me, "Listen, if you don't take this job," and I was just engaged as well. He's like, "If you don't do this for your family, if you don't," he's like, "I'll fire you." Basically, he's like, "You need to go do this. You're crazy to want to stay, and
wow.
I don't know that I can make it a full-time job for you, but I think enough of you to tell you this is what I think you should do." So I went to Fairfield and had a great 5 years there. And incidentally, I'd come here during that time in 2004 and visited this campus. I tell this story all the time. I walked up to Blair Arch and I just fell in love, like so many people do. And then I came back here in 2000, and I forget the time, 2000, must have been 14, to take another look around campus when the job opened up. And again, I fell in love. I got on the phone to my mother. I said, "Listen, every kid should have an opportunity to go to school like this. It's this majestic." And so I threw my name in the hat and got very fortunate, very fortunate. But I think what's gotten me here is I don't like to be outworked. I work tirelessly, and I have a passion for what I do. I love coaching. I love being around kids. I like being inspired every day by the players. That's why you do it. You try to inspire, but at the same time, if you're not inspired in return, there's no reason to continue. So, and this place is amazing. From everyone I've met here, the talent of the student athletes, and just the genuine environment here is unlike anything I've ever seen. Everyone genuinely wants to be here. Yeah. It's not a stepping stone. And I find that very fulfilling.
So let's get into the students.
Mm-hmm.
What type of high school students that are women, because it's the women's soccer program, right? What type of students do you look for at Princeton University?
I think ultimately kids that want to be challenged. I think the curriculum here is extremely challenging, and I feel like you want to have excellence at the school, and so if there's going to be excellence in the classroom, you need to have the same thing on the soccer field. You need excellence. In order to have excellence, you need to be really good at what you do, very passionate about what you do, and you have to be willing to grind. I think that, to me, that's the word we always talk about with our team, is this willingness to grind and work as hard as you possibly can to maximize your potential. And so you have to find those kind of kids. Like, there are a lot of really good players, and I'm very fortunate. I coach women, and women are inherently bright. I mean, I find it every single day. My wife's a lot smarter than I am, and my mother's a lot smarter than I am. And so I look at that, what women bring to the table on a daily basis. And so there's so many kids that have really good GPAs, so many kids that have unbelievable SATs or ACTs. So you have to kind of dissect a little bit more and learn more about the character and how will they be able to handle challenges, because the reality is every kid that goes off to play in a college sport has had success in that sport, or you wouldn't play it, right? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't put yourself through the ringer, so to speak. And so we have to do our due diligence. We have to do a lot of research with guidance counselors and coaches, and develop really good relationships with their club coaches to know that you're getting the facts, the truth, not that I want to put this on my list of schools that I've sent kids to, but legitimately, this is what I think of this kid. This is what you see on a daily basis. This is the kind of kid you know that will come in and compete and do well. And so that's what we're looking for. We look for kids that really want to grind. And so how do you figure that out? Well, one of the things for me is when we watch a game, when they lose the ball, what do? Some kids throw their hands in the air. Some kids put their head down, and that instantaneous reaction or lack thereof, to me, says a lot about the individual. Kids that lose the ball and fight like crazy to get it back, that's the kid I want all day, every day. And those are harder to find, quite honestly, because that moment of failure affects so many people, and it affects them in different ways. And it's pretty much everybody has this like 1 second where they're trying to figure out what to do. Yeah. It's the ones that are instantaneous that you jump right on top.
So now when a student comes to Princeton University, what can they expect? What's the year-round inside look of a women's soccer program from when did they get to school? Is it August, September, and what happens all year?
Well, they usually come in mid-August, which is nice in a lot of ways. The rest of Division I starts at the beginning of August. So we have about 2 weeks behind in that sense. On the positive, it's 2 more weeks where people can work, or 2 more weeks where freshmen have a little bit of a break before they get here, a little bit of a reprieve, and also for the coaches to have a little bit more time with families, et cetera. So I think that's, we start mid-August, and then we carry on through, depending on how the season goes, we can go until, like this year, we wound up playing until after Thanksgiving, which is, a tremendous season. But for the majority of our league in particular, usually it's the first week in November you're finished. So it really is a very short window with a lot that's that you have to do in that time frame. So you're allowed.
How many games? How many practices?
17 games. We play 17 games. We usually train 6, or usually involved with the team 6 out of 7 days a week. It's mandated that you give them 1 day off by the NCAA. There are often times where we will give them a 2nd day off, particularly in the Ivy League season. So basically what happens is you play 2 games a week for basically the earlier part of the season, but the non-Ivy season. Once you get in the Ivy League, we try to keep it to 1 game a week. Mm-hmm. So the focus is just on that Saturday game. And as such, we really oftentimes will give them a Sunday off, then followed by potentially a Wednesday. So we'll work on Monday, Tuesday, give them Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday, they come back. It just depends. But we've found that gives them a little bit more recovery, a little bit more excitement. To be back on the field, and and when all the focus goes into that 1 game. Then the off season, the way this.
So that takes you to Thanksgiving?
Yeah, to Thanksgiving. Well, potentially it could be earlier than that. I mean, like this year, we wound up going to the Elite Eight, so that was a really, really long season. That's an uncharacteristic season, a very fortunate season. So otherwise, you're usually done the first week of November. At which point you're mandated to give them a couple weeks off, and then you can resume, a couple hours a week with them. The off season, way Princeton is set up, we don't really see them again until February.
So what do they do between November and February?
So we'll do a little bit with them in November. If the season doesn't go as well, we'll do a little bit with them, a couple hours a week up until December. But then they have exam period, or not exam, but they have final papers and things like that. But then the way Princeton works, they have they come back from the holiday, and they have some papers due as well, and they've got their exams. So really, all of January is spent focusing on academics. And then they have a week break, and then they come back in February, and that's when we get back to it, which is we work 2 hours with a ball a week and 4 hours of strength and conditioning all of February, most of March. And then the Ivy League allows you 24 hours to train your team whenever you want to allocate that into a certain amount of time. So what we do is in April, we basically train 2 times a week at an hour and a half a clip, and then they have 3 days of strength and conditioning. So we were with them 5 days a week. We're mandated to give them off 2 in the off season, which is nice in a lot of ways. It allows for rest and recovery. It allows them to do other things. I mean, Princeton's very much about a holistic approach. It allows for that, which I like. I think we incur less injuries as a result, and I think the kids are able to do a lot more things, which is nice. They're able to do other things on campus and focus a little bit more on their studies and get involved with clubs and things like that, which is nice for them.
Yeah. So what happens in May, June, and July? Are they on their own, or do you give them stuff that maybe they can go play on a club team of some sort? What happens
We
then?
pray a lot. We hope that they do what they're supposed to do, because I think the reality is if you do all the work with them in the spring and then they go home and they don't do what they're supposed to physically in terms of weightlifting, conditioning, soccer, then you lose what you built all that, up over those 3 months. So most of them will play on a team of some sort in the summer. If not, they'll have some sort of training. They always come back in pretty good condition. I give them credit for that. That's something we're really happy with because the more fit they are, the less we have to work on that in the preseason. And our preseason is so small that we really don't want to spend time doing that. So they'll go home and they'll have a strength and conditioning packet sent to them by our strength and conditioning coach, and that's pretty much it. We'll keep in touch just to see how they're doing overall, but ultimately we trust them.
So now, when your season is in the fall and high school seasons are in the fall, how difficult is it to recruit and find these kids that are in the high school season, or do you depend more in the summer months when you can actually go out and see more of the club teams?
Good question. I think we don't see many high school games, quite honestly, because we're so focused on our own team and there's just not that much time. And in the downtime we have, we want to spend it with our families. So yeah, the club, it becomes the main thing for us in terms of recruitment. We do talk to the high school coaches as well. We just don't see them play many high school games. And in general, high school games tend to be a little bit scatterbrained at moments. Some of them just are not the same level of game. So we rely heavily upon high school coaches for character assessment and club coaches for overall technical assessment and things like that, developmental situations, because they're around that level of kid all the time. But yeah, so as soon as the season ends, we're right at it. We get right to it. We are away a lot. We traveled, I think, almost 70,000 miles a year ago across the country. This year, we actually were just in Canada a little while ago. So we do quite a bit. I mean, November, we're recruiting a lot. There's now, thankfully, a window over the holiday where we're not allowed to recruit. It's the first dead period, which is really nice to have. So we have about 2.5 weeks where we can go hang out with our families and not feel guilty about it. I think as a coach, you always worry about, is so-and-so doing more than us? Right or wrong, I know that's how I feel. So it's nice to know that you have that downtime. But in November, we recruit. Early December, we recruit. And then we're back at it in January. We recruit in February, March, April, May, and into June. And then July, we do some camps, and then we're back to it. So soccer is one of those sports where you can recruit a lot. Doesn't have the same kind of window that football and basketball do, which is probably not ideal because you're constantly on the road, constantly feel like you need to be out there keeping up with the Joneses.
Now, is there certain tournaments that students should go to? Is there ones in the South, the West, the ones in the Northeast here? Or how does soccer really work, or do you just scatter yourself pretty much all over?
I mean, I think the soccer landscape has changed quite a bit, certainly since I was a player, and more specifically in the last few years. There's a thing called the Developmental Academy, and that's one league, and there's another one called the ECNL, and those, for the most part, have quote-unquote the best teams. Not necessarily all the best players. There are a lot of very good players. There are very good players on other teams, and so our challenge is to go to those big events, and those happen for the ECNL 4 times a year or so. The Developmental Academy 3. So we go to probably those 7 tournaments or so, maybe a little bit more. And then we have other ones where we look to find those teams that aren't in those leagues, that haven't gotten in for whatever reason, through no fault of their own. And then we go to things like the Jefferson Cup, which is a big tournament. The Disney Showcase is a big tournament. The Castle Showcase, which is usually in conjunction with the Final Four. Usually it's in Raleigh, North Carolina, that area. So we attend that. We go to some local showcases as well. We go to showcases in Canada. We do really try to keep tabs on what the national teams are doing in Canada, Mexico, US, and abroad. So
Do you
Yeah.
do anything abroad? Is there any showcases that are in Africa, Asia,
Oh, there are.
Europe?
We haven't done, I mean, we haven't done as much of that. I think we've had a really good tie with Canada. We've had some tremendous players that come in from Canada. We've got a player coming in next year from who's from the Mexican national team, which is great. So we don't have as much. We don't do as much abroad. We haven't been over to England, and which has some very good players, in France and Germany. We haven't done that yet. We do get some interest, and we look at a lot of video. The challenge, of course, is the number of times you can see them to make a decision. So you go over there one time, and it's the level. You got to figure out the level. Is the level what we need? The kid is doing really well, but the competition isn't great, and you've flown over and spent all this money. Those are the things you have to kind of figure out. And we also have some really, really good players domestically to look at. So we're very fortunate. We're at an unbelievable school. I consider this one of the best jobs in the country. And as a result, we get a good look at some really, really talented players.
So you said video. A lot of parents always ask, do I send the whole game film? Do I send the highlight film? Do I send 1 minute film, 20-minute film? How does it work at the college level?
Every coach is different. I mean, there are some coaches who don't like video at all. I like it. We have a big screen TV in our office, and we watch a ton of the game film. I mean, tons. Like every day we watch a few hours. So highlight video for me is, I think the most important thing for parents to understand is the highlight needs to be a highlight. It needs to show your best moments. And so if you're showing on video our average moments, meaning like if you're a goal scorer, you're a striker, putting on the goal, 1 goal or 2 goals is not conducive to a great striker. So when I see that, what is that? Or if you're a goalkeeper and the saves aren't great saves, there's only a few here or there, that's not highlighting enough for me, So I think the highlights need to be specific to what you do really, really well, and sometimes that gets lost. So for me, a 5-minute highlight film is great. If it's 10 minutes, great, but it should really show what you do exceptionally well. We also watch games. We watch games start to finish, and it should be a game that showcases the talents. So I think for me, I do watch quite a bit. Our whole staff watches quite a bit of film. So I'm in that corner. I do believe it's good to watch. It's just more information.
Now, a lot of parents tend to get involved in their daughter's recruitment. Do you find that you like it more that the daughter calls you up and talks to you, or is it the mom or dad that ends up giving you a call and talking to you?
What I always say to all parents and all kids is if the kid's not ready to have a conversation with the coach on the phone, then they're not ready for the recruitment process. And that changes for every kid. Every kid, like I said to you before, how immature I was, I don't know that I would have handled that very well at the time either, as certainly as a freshman. Some of these kids are really, really young. So I think everyone's on their own timetable. I think parents should be involved. Oftentimes I will have the player on with the parents to have a conversation, because parents have questions, and I'm a parent too, and my kids are really young, but I understand the interest in knowing what's going on. Certainly when it comes to finances and things like that, there's some big questions that need to be answered, and parents and kids can't answer those questions. The parents need to be involved. So for me, it should always be spearheaded by the child. When you have kids on campus and the parents ask all the questions, I'm not a huge fan of that. I think it's the relationship you're going to have for 4 years is with that child. It's not going to be so much with that parent. You see parents at tailgates and you wave to them, and the reality is some parents are going to like you and some are not because of the playing time. So, for me, the link needs to be with the player. And so I like I said from the beginning, whenever they're ready to have a good conversation is when we want to, because I'll be honest, those conversations can make or break the situation for us. A really engaged kid who can formulate their own thoughts and opinions, who has really good questions, has a personality, is a kid I want to coach. And we have to be really selective, and that is one of the criteria, is having a really good kid who you envision yourself coaching and wanting to be around, because when they get there, they're going to inspire you.
Good. So we're coming to the end of our show. I usually ask my guests, what advice do you want to give to the parents out there, their daughters that want to go to school, to Princeton University, or just to play soccer at the college level? What advice would you want to give them?
I always start by saying cast a wide net. I think the more specific you get with colleges, the more you miss. I think there's so many good schools out there. Obviously, Princeton, for many, many good reasons, is at the pinnacle. But there are so many good schools out there. And like I said to you before, when I started my college process, I looked at a lot of the wrong schools. Too big, too difficult to get into. And so as a result, I wound up in a different place, which wound up being great for me. But I think when you're starting from the beginning, you really should cast a wide net and figure out the criteria that are most important to your child. Is it an urban setting? Is it a suburban setting? Is it a big school? Is it a small school? Is it a school that's predicated on big time football? Is it something that's more focused on other things? Does it have your major or intended major? Does it have what your daughter is looking for? And I think that each person has to have a set of criteria. So what I tell every family to do is, on one axis, write down the things that are most valuable to you. And on the other axis, write down the schools that you visit, and then tick off the boxes that work for you, and a sum total at the bottom, and that'll give you at least an idea. I also tell families to take notes. You know, when you leave your time on the campus, write down what resonates at that moment in time. It could be anything. It could be the way the student body looks. It could be the campus. It could be the feel you had from the coach or didn't have. It could be anything. But there should be bullet points that resonate with you after every single visit. So, you know, I think that's a pretty general answer, but I've sent a lot of kids to college, and that's what I've always started with, is you've got to cast a wide net, look at a lot of the options that are out there. Don't limit yourself to just small things. But if you want to play, you know, in certain schools, you need to obviously talk to all the coaches and get the criteria that's important to them.
Great. Well, thank you very much for
You're
coming.
welcome. Thanks for the time.
Yeah. So you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.